I'm Cadeem Layler.
And I'm Bethan Moorcraft.
And this is the Half Bank Podcast, brought to you by Money.ca.
This week on the podcast, we've decided to shake things up a bit.
Instead of diving into one topic with the help of experts, we're going to explore a bunch of topics, just the two of us.
And to make things even more interesting,
that's one word for it,
we have absolutely no idea what the topics are going to be. Now, I'm not sure what we did to annoy our producers, but they decided to give us this episode with very little prep time. And to make matters worse, they're going to throw some random personal questions at us as well.
This may be payback from one producer for not doing an episode on Magic the Gathering cards. But anyways, we hope you enjoy the chaos. Before us, we have the Wheel of Finance. Actually, it's just our computer with a topics randomizer and a sound effect. But hey, this is a podcast.
So, what we're going to do is spin the wheel,
click a button on the randomizer,
and then talk about whatever topic we land on.
We're not going to get through all of the topics, but we'll see how many we can squeeze into this episode. So now let's spin the wheel and see what we discuss first.
Is university worth it? Ooh.
That's a good one.
Yeah. I've often thought about this, actually, because I studied English literature and language at university. Yeah. I was a real book nerd. I loved everything about kind of studying language, etc. But I look back and I think it was a passion, and I don't know that it necessarily, took me to where I am today. After that undergraduate degree, I then did a master's in news journalism, which was very much a kind of skills-based course.
More hands-on a little bit.
Exactly, yeah. It was a sort of 9 to 5. I actually felt like I was a journalist throughout that year. We created a newspaper. We had online stuff. We had a beat where we used to go and practice reporting and actually talk to people and all that sort of stuff. So that was very much more sort of hands-on, and it also felt like an apprenticeship, actually. So that kind of set me up for my current career. But in order to get there, that's 4 years worth of student debt, which hurts.
Yeah. Because I guess I'm wondering that master's sounds like that would have been very useful if you were able to get that at that undergraduate level too, like getting the experience to go along with the kind of more theory.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
But actually, I chose not to pursue a journalism undergraduate degree because it wasn't quite as hands-on or skills-based. There was more kind of theory behind it and all that sort of stuff, which is important, but I feel like the skills that I learned in a very sort of practical environment, I could bring over to the workplace straight away, but that's not always the case.
Yeah, because I mean, the undergrad piece is like you also enjoyed it, right? You said it was also a bit of a passion thing. Because sometimes I think about what I did for my undergrad as well, like politics history, with the intention of being able to get into that field after. But I guess sometimes it's not just about the degree itself. It's kind of, do you get skills, anything applicable, connections, any work experience as you go through that program? Because in the case of me doing the politics history program, I was going to the University of Ottawa, and I hoped to be able to get a co-op placement. But it's just because not being bilingual really hindered my chances of doing that. And then that kind of took away from a big piece of why I went there in the first place. So not having that experience. And then I thought, okay, I can't. Tough time getting a job in my field at the moment. So when I tried to go back to school. So went back to school, did a 1-year master's. And then it stuck with me going to this government job, trying to apply. And like all they asked me during the interview was like, why do you want this job if you have a master's? I guess not looking past the degree, not looking at me trying to get experience. It's just like having the degrees without much work experience really hindered me in that case. Yeah. And I think that's something that people like, educators and marketers really don't factor in when they're trying to give you the value of a degree.
Mm-hmm. Let's just talk quickly though about paying for university. We've kind of touched on it a little bit, but I feel the weight of my student debt.
100%.
It's I'm paying back to the UK. It's a large sum, and it honestly hurts my soul. But it's just one of those things. It just comes out of my paycheck every month, and there we are. But it feels like it's going to take me a long time to pay that back, and I'm sure people feel that here too. I mean, that's the other thing you need to think about in terms of how you finance education and whether you go down the route that I have done, because while I'm glad I did it, the interest rates on my loan are punitive, I would say, 100%. which is annoying.
And I think a piece of that too is going to university kind of like for the right reason, because there was a study I looked at a while back that said that some people go to university just because it's like what they're supposed to do after high school. They're not really sure of what they want to do with their career. They kind of pick a random degree, and it's kind of too expensive to just do that just because, or
Yeah,
just to have
you've
a
got to be
degree.
sure.
Yeah, if you're not sure that you're going to really use it, you're not really sure what you want to do with it afterwards. You like we just as we've discussed, you kind of need to have a line in terms of who do you want to network with, like what kind of companies do you want to work with. You sort of need to know that, have a sense of that at least before you go into it, because $20,000 plus on average for like an average 4-year degree, and more if you're an international student, you can't afford to like not know where you want to go with it.
So, question for you then. If you could turn back time, would you do it all again, or would you do anything differently?
I think for me, I definitely would try to get some like part-time work or volunteering, or definitely would have been more proactive about trying to get work experience for my first degree. Even if I couldn't get the co-op placements, try to network, talk to my professors, the ones I got along with better, see if I could get some sort of work on experience my resume, basically before I left that 4-year degree for sure.
I definitely needed to try a bit harder to network and kind of build I guess, like a personal professional brand for myself from a younger age. That's a very kind of big task to put on yourself as a 18, 19-year-old. But I think the earlier you can think about some of those things and be proactive about your career is the better.
Okay, so now it's time for one of our mystery questions. Let's see. So, courtesy of this jar in front of me, I'm going to pull one out. Let's see what we get.
Drum roll, please.
Your most annoying financial habit. How would your partner describe your money habits slash loved ones?
Ooh, I think I'm overcautious. I
Okay.
feel like I'm a no. I'm always a no. Oh no, too risky. Oh, I don't want to do that. So I feel like that can be frustrating. And I also, if I need to buy something, so say we were, I go camping a lot, for example,
Okay.
and there's always something new that you need, a sleeping mat or a sleeping bag or whatever. I've got most of it now, but I will research for weeks, waiting for the price to change, and it never does. Like, there'll be a sale. I'll wait for the sale. Whereas if you just buy it, then you can enjoy it straight away. So that's probably the biggest bugbear against me, I would say. Bugging and camping. Sorry.
Okay.
Link there.
That is not too bad though, actually. I mean, like, seems like you're, like to definitely research the things you buy, make sure they're the best. So, not the worst thing in the world. Maybe there's a middle point, but like,
Yeah.
I think that's better than the opposite at least. I think in my case, I think of the most annoying financial habit. I think sometimes a small thing. I think that actually one of our previous guests pointed out is if like she said if you have if you have ADHD. I don't think I do, but I don't know if I do. But she's saying sometimes what you can do is like you'll forget you already have something in the fridge or whatever, then you go buy it again, and that just and I think sometimes I have done that. It's like I'll buy more like blue cheese, whatever. Oh, we already have that. Okay, I didn't know. So something small like that, basically. But I think overall, though, I think partner would describe as, uh, you know, pretty cautious, but at the same time, I think we both like going out. We both like traveling a bit when we can. But I would say Annika's probably better with like not going out eating out as much. I
More
think,
control.
yeah, I think with her, I definitely get way less like skip the dishes. So that's I think that's a good thing. Okay, retirement prep versus YOLO, trying to appeal to the young kids out there. So let's dive into this one a little bit. Bethan, do you want to start us off?
I'll start off by saying I say YOLO, but perhaps that's the Brit or the Welsh person in me. Who knows?
I never thought of that actually. Do they say YOLO over there?
We definitely do. Maybe it's just me.
That's hilarious.
Retirement prep versus YOLO. Well, this is an interesting one because I have never thought about retirement prep more than doing this job. Before that, it was just kind of, a pension in the back seat, putting a bit of the paycheck into it.
Yeah, maybe some RSP contributions a
Some
little bit.
RSP
Yeah.
contributions. I think my view on retirement planning at the moment, and this is not advice, is that I have other milestones directly ahead of me that require the minimal savings that I have.
Same boat for sure. Yeah.
So, like, Cadeem, I know you're getting married this summer.
Yeah.
That is not a small expense.
Exactly. Like I was good. I didn't want to cut you off, but I was just, as you said that too, I felt the same way because I feel like there's so many different things, like huge expenses that come up before you get to that point. I think at this point, when it comes to retirement prep, it's literally trying to put like maybe 100, 200 away kind of thing a month. And
Hmm.
then, like hope that adds up because they always say, $50 this month. By the time you're 60, whatever, it's going to add up to this much. And that's kind of been the extent of what I've done so far, just because you think about, trying to get a house and then some of the costs that will come with that.
Hmm.
Like, obviously being, my partner was a big piece of why we were able to do that. Being single, I don't think it wouldn't have happened yet. So doing that, and then also costs that come with having a house, and then kind of like the maintenance, mortgage, and so forth, and then wedding now, and then you think about maybe kids in a few years possibly, and then
Penniless summertime.
yeah, and then after that, you're thinking even 20 years down the line, you're like, okay, now I can start saving, but not really because then you want to possibly save up for their schooling too. Yeah,
Education.
so then it's like, okay, so when do you really start trying to put away, huge chunks of money? It just seems like the only thing that's workable at the moment is just the small sums and trying to do that consistently.
Yeah, definitely the chipping away method. We can
Yeah.
coin that here.
Yeah, and I think that seems like the only thing surmountable unless I hit that hitting mid six figures and it's all good to go. But at the moment, it's just that's all I can do.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know about you, but it feels like the retirement age seems to be just drifting further and further away into the future.
No, 100%. And it seems like because you can take it. I think maybe U.S. example. I know you can take it early sometimes, but then it's like reduced benefits if you do. So you kind of ideally don't want to do that. So I'm just like, okay, I guess you kind of want to stick it out.
Hmm.
And I guess for me too, I've always thought that ideally, if I have mental capacity and physical capacity, I'll probably still do some type of work once I hit retirement age, even if it's not like a 9 to 5 type of thing.
Hmm.
Hopefully, you establish yourself where you can continue to freelance or speaking, whatever it is, and still be able to have some money coming in. But then I wouldn't want that to like have to be financial necessity at
Yeah.
that point. It's just kind of like because I want to keep my mind active, I want to keep contributing, whatever, as opposed to I have to keep working until the day I die, pretty much.
Now, I do understand the YOLO mentality too, because if you look back to the pandemic,
Yeah,
we couldn't spend anything. I actually
exactly.
saved money
Same.
during
I
that
cut
two
down on my
years.
debt a decent
Yeah.
amount during that period too. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
there was no discretionary spending. I was sat in my back garden reading books, and
yeah.
so so now suddenly everything's back open again, or it has been for the last year or so, and there are opportunities that I feel like I missed out on some. I was mid to late 20s during that time, and that's a
Exactly.
time where you want to be going out with friends and exploring and trying new things and new foods, etc. So I do very much understand the sort of live for today, invest in yourself idea. Probably where I use it most would be traveling.
Mm.
I have a kind of travel pot because I have to go back to the UK and Europe quite a bit to see family and
All
friends,
right.
but also trying to explore kind of further afield now as well. And I think what you learn when you travel and you experience new cultures and new food and meet new people, learn new languages, that turns you into a well-rounded individual in just the same way as going to university or getting a job, etc. does. It's just a different type of learning, and I think that's important too.
A social piece of it too is realizing, okay, so getting married now and then probably kids in the next few years, like I honestly don't want to get on a plane with a toddler. I'm not bothered to deal with that. So I'm like, I want to try to travel as much as I can at this stage. And yeah, learning things too, like traveling to New Orleans and just like seeing a new culture, and then also seeing, being able to like see a guy slap an alligator, just interesting experiences that just, very well rounded. And like I
Mhm.
said, yeah, I'm not trying to do any of those trips with a toddler myself. Fiance's kind of down, like I'm not doing it. So I'm understanding I'm gonna be locked down for a few years. Try to do it now.
Interesting that you just slapped in seeing a guy slapping out, threw in seeing a guy slap an
No,
alligator.
it's
It's an
enriching
interesting
experiences. So
experience.
that's what I'm willing to invest in myself. Like would I have seen that live? A few feet away. If I had not done that, I would not have. So there we
Yeah.
go.
Yeah, it also so this idea of investing yourself can expand into so many different areas. I know in another half banked episode we're going to look at investing, but there's that idea of spending money to on self improvement or
Right.
self education or investing in yourself in how you're living today. Um, I think it's worth it.
Right. Exactly. Because a piece of it, mental health, avoiding burnout, all things that relate to financial success as well. All right. All right. Our next mystery question: what did you do with your first ever paycheck?
So I think my first ever job, I was actually a cricket coach.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, back in the UK, I used to play a lot of cricket, and I'm pretty sure my first paycheck went towards some new gear, like a bat or new helmet. So it was working in the sport that I loved to fund the sport that I loved. So I think that's actually a really I'm happy with that.
No,
How
that's
about
not.
you?
No, that sounds awesome. I don't think I've. My story's not as cool. I'm pretty sure, like for what it's like Wonderland. So first paycheck from that was probably maybe going out with a friend, kind of thing. Like being able to have like more than like 2 beers without it hurting my bank account too much. I
Thought you were
think.
going to say one of those extra large slushies.
No, no, I guess I was never into those as much. So I think that was that was my come up basically.
Okay, financial literacy. That's a big one.
Absolutely. And I guess I'm wondering if we want to just focus on basically financial literacy at an early age. I think we always try to touch on it a little bit as we're older, but I think this is something that should apply like as you're growing up, basically.
Definitely. Well, we should start there because, the earlier the better, in my opinion.
100%. So I think that there's some programs, from what I know, I think across Canada trying to put it in like elementary school curriculums, but that's I think only the last like 10 years that there's really been focus on that. I remember growing up, I'd never learned about simple things, just like budgeting and so forth. That's all stuff I just kind of learned, the hard way, basically, when I kind of went off to university for the first time by myself at 17. So I think there's definitely a better roadmap for that. What was your experience like trying to learn financial literacy?
I had absolutely no financial literacy taught in school. For me, it was very much steep learning curves all the way through higher education. I remember paying, my first water bill at
Oh, okay.
university and thinking, what do I have to do? Like, who do I call? What does
Right.
this mean on the meter?
Yeah.
Things like that. It should be straightforward. You leave home and you should be equipped to do all of these things.
Right.
But unfortunately for us, our age group, I don't think that was well taught at schools. I do believe there is an effort now to
Address
improve
that.
that,
Yeah.
address that. Yeah. And we had James Batterston on one of the earlier podcast episodes that was about who do you trust with your money. And he said there's actually quite a lot of educational tools and free resources at public libraries and things like that. And there's, of course, lots of stuff online too.
Right.
But I think the issue is that you have to search that out.
Yeah, exactly. And the searching out can like be, make a conscious effort. And then also, with online, especially nowadays, like we look at, TikTok, all the influencers, people who are not really qualified to be giving financial advice, telling kind of impressionable young people, like, buy this stock, you'll get like $10,000 in 1 month. That it just creates kind of more danger in a sense if you don't know the good stuff to look out for. I think kind of if you want to dive into financial literacy online, you need a base level of literacy to start with.
Mhm.
And now I think like social media has just kind of made that much harder.
Yeah, definitely. And just going back to the school point, I just wish someone had dragged me into a classroom and,
Mhm.
made me learn about how to do my taxes and what do all these different boxes mean and,
Right.
what is investing in the stock market.
Yeah, and then also because like, coming from the UK as well. I mean, I think like have you filed your taxes for the first time like in Canada? I'm guessing by now.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah. So the story behind that for people who don't know, in the UK, as a salaried employee, often your taxes, you pay income tax through a system called Pay or PAYE, which is pay as you earn. And so your employer or your pension provider will take your income tax and your national insurance tax out of your wages before you get it. So essentially, you just take your money and go. So before I moved to Canada, I'd actually never filed taxes. So when I got my first T4 aged 24,
Yeah.
I was like, whoa, what is this? What are all these boxes? What do I do? Um, I did a lot of reading, but there's a lot to take in actually just to kind of understand what it all means. So I think in the end I used some sort of online
Mm.
tax prep platform. I don't know if it was TurboTax or
Yeah.
Wealthsimple or one of those. But in the years that have followed, I've kind of learned a bit more. And also, I don't know that I necessarily optimized my tax return by doing it that way, and
But
that's important.
but that's the thing, because like in my case, I'm lucky that my uncle like he helps me with him. He's an accountant, so he's able to get all the credits, like ask about all the different things, and that stuff you also really don't know unless you kind of have to go online, Google through that, like see what can apply to you and so forth. There's like work from home credits and all that, but that's stuff I would not have thought if I was just doing it myself.
Mhm.
And obviously, taxes get more complicated if you also have like, do you have a second job? Are you kind of like partly self-employed? All of that makes everything more complicated.
Yeah.
And it's stuff that, yeah, you're kind of stuck just kind of learning yourself or trusting someone. And at least in my case, made it easier to trust this person because, related by blood, but not everyone necessarily has the luxury of having the person that,
Yeah.
related to them doing their taxes and so forth.
Yeah, definitely. And I just kind of building on the newcomer to to Canada issue. I read a stat recently, it was last week, I think, that the Canadian government counted more than 800,000 foreign students in Canada at the end of last year, which is a 31% increase over the previous year.
Oh, wow.
And a lot of those students, like, I love it here. I'm sure they do. A lot
Right.
of students will stay in Canada on a postgraduate work permit. Then they may get permanent residency and, down the line may even become citizens. They're all learning a new financial system
Yeah.
when they move here. And it's different around the world. Like, you might think the UK and Canada is quite similar, and of course there are similarities, but I had to learn a lot in the first few years when I moved here.
I mean, yeah, filing taxes, that's a huge one.
Yeah.
And then even just when it comes, I guess, to like moving somewhere else and finding like the value of things, because even as you move from province to province, I have some family like lives in Yellowknife. The cost of goods like vegetables much more expensive over there. Kind of knowing good value for goods, basically, that's one small thing that might not translate sometimes depending on what country you're coming from.
Mm-hmm. The other one for me was the use of credit cards.
Oh, yeah.
So when as a young person in the UK, and I think this is quite common, I pretty much only used a debit card. It was good for a few reasons. I only spent the money that I had at a very small overdraft. Never tried to never go into it. And why would I use a credit card to
Right.
use money that I didn't technically have? That was my thought process at the time. Moving here, I now realize that almost everyone uses a credit card for all things, all purchases.
And you start pretty early, because I'm trying to think about my first one I had at university. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and that, I mean, obviously there are benefits. You build up your credit score, you have protections that you wouldn't have on a debit card, all sorts of things like that. But I do personally think that it may lead to some, what's the word I'm looking for? Spending, not unnecessary spending, but careless spending, maybe among young people. Because I remember looking at some students. I came to U of T for an exchange for a few months, and there were students with huge widescreen TVs, and there was me watching Netflix on my phone back in London. I just thought, how are you affording to buy that? And it's all been put on a credit card. So I don't know. For me, that was a bit of a culture shock, a big change, but everyone learns in different
hard
ways.
way. Yeah, because I touched on the very first episode, Bank of Parents. For a while, I was like doing, going out, and I was spending for like, Uber or like cab rides at the time, I guess, before Uber, not to date myself too much, but spending cab rides, putting them on the credit card and kind of not thinking much about it. But that stuff adds up, like weekend over weekend. Next, it's a few $100s added up over something that you're not really thinking about it because it's just so easy. Tap the card, put the code in at the time, whatever, and then you're just good to go. So, it does make, I think, a piece of it aside from cash too, it just makes it harder to track in a sense, unless you're actually making sure you go in online, checking your statement. And that's something that's a small thing I've learned to like be more careful of as I go along, is now I just kind of like have like, weekly or bi-weekly check-in on my statement, looking through the purchases instead of just scanning, and just leaving it at that.
Yeah. And there are lots of apps and tools and things like that you can use to do that, so to keep track of your finances.
Right.
In a better way.
And there are some specifically for like subscriptions too, and which is a small point, but apparently like it's pretty common for people to spend $50 plus $100 plus a month on subscriptions they're not even using. So that's a small thing, is checking for those things you don't use anymore. And again, with a credit card, it's easy to forget about those expenses.
So thinking about this, would you describe yourself today as a financially literate person?
I'm still more to learn. I think that there's so many different areas of financial literacy. I think budgeting I've definitely become better with, like just in terms of kind of like judging the value of something I'm buying. Is it worth it? Kind of trying to look long term, but also looking long term, balancing the short term. Something I'm still working on, like our whole retirement talk. But then also I think investing is something that I'm still definitely not very versed in. So trying to get better with that. But compared to where I was like 10 years ago, miles ahead for sure.
Yeah. That's good. I would say the same. But there's always new things to learn, as you said. So, we're talking a few days after the Bank of Canada raised interest rates to 5%. I'm not sure if you asked just the average person on the street that they would understand fully what that meant for their finances, for future purchases, for loans, etc.
I honestly, before I started working here, I don't think I would have either. So that just shows that.
Yeah.
So.
And that's something, we can talk about financial literacy in schools, education for newcomers, all of these different things, and just kind of learning through experience as well. But being able to pick apart what's changing in the current economy is another kind of important thing that we need to figure out a better way to kind of break down into normal language.
Yeah, because I was going to say, if you have an economics class, they might teach the primary piece, but they might not tie it back to if you have any sort of, mortgage and so forth. How does that affect you directly? I think part of like how you make it more applicable is tying it back kind of like at that level.
Mm-hmm.
And then, even just, introducing classes that teach people things like filing taxes, opening a bank account, budget, credit card debt, why you don't want it, like the interest, all of those things that people kind of gloss over when they're trying to sell you credit cards, basically.
Yeah. All right. My turn for the jar. And our next random question for Cadeem. What is the first thing you ever saved up to buy that you are proud of?
I think from what I can remember, was getting one of my mom's family friends. She was staying over for a while with us, and she's just very helpful. Very supportive, like over a summer. So when I saved up enough, she like needed a new robe. My mom suggested, so I got her a new one, and that was kind of like my first gift to someone else with like all of my own money.
Yeah, kind of building on that. This isn't necessarily a gift or an object that I bought, but I remember the first time I took my mum to the ballet. And it's
nice.
just like something that you like an experience you can share with someone. And I think it is with parents because they spend money to bring you up and take you and give you experiences. And when you can give that back one day, 100%. It feels so good.
Oh yeah, and so I thought that counts for them too. They definitely just appreciate that gesture.
Yeah, definitely. That was a good day. All right, and the next random question from the jar. What is the first thing you would do or buy if you received $1 million?
I guess my head right now goes to just like paying off a house and upgrading to a bigger. But I feel like in Toronto, it's like it might just like barely be enough anyway. So I guess that is where my head goes.
Well, I mean, I don't want to be boring, but I'd love to get on the housing ladder, so that would help. Yeah. Let's do something a bit more outrageous.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll say housing is kind of the default answer. It has to be, especially living in GTA. So go to your real answer.
I'll buy a one-way trip to Hawaii. Let's go.
Okay, nice. I was honestly thinking travel too. Like honestly, I probably just want to be able to just honestly travel a lot. A bunch of places in mind, like Australia, Jamaica, of course. All right. Last random question. What's the worst buyer's remorse you've ever had?
I've bought a few bad phones in my day. I don't know that it's the worst buyer's remorse, but it's the first thing that's come to my head. I refuse to spend money on phones because I, occasionally drop them. Occasionally leave them places. Yeah. It's just the phone is my nemesis. So I keep buying, I might buy a $200 phone or, these days to get anything good, you've got to spend 500 plus.
Yeah.
So yes, I had a trusty Samsung for years, and then I switched over to another brand, and it was awful. I hated it. So yeah, that then didn't survive very long, and I've then since switched back.
Yeah, but kind of necessary, but that's a tougher one too. And obviously, if you're losing a phone's like the worst thing ever. I get that. I'm trying. Thankfully, I guess like a house isn't my answer. That would really suck.
That would.
Yeah. I guess like one of the things that this might qualify also taught me a little lesson too, like the lesson sometimes of just like buying quality instead. So like for jeans, basically, like sometimes I go to a more expensive place like Jack and Jones. I'm like, it's like $100 jeans is ridiculous. So I'm like, let me just go to like Walmart or I go to wherever. And I buy those ones and they can fit okay, but they just wear out like in literally 2 months, the same level of wear I'd get from the more expensive ones in like a year, sometimes, a year and a half. So I figured it actually, it worked out to being cheaper over time to just buy the one expensive pair one time and then do that. And I thought that was my lesson on, quality over quantity for some things at least.
Do you feel like you realized that at a certain age? Because I feel like I understand that and I try to go by that these days, but probably didn't when I was 21.
No, I think that definitely wouldn't have applied. I think I wasn't even in the position to really be able to buy quality over quantity when I was younger.
Yeah, fair.
Not to sidetrack, but there's like a whole. I think there's something Terry Pratchett wrote about like this an allegory of the soldier. You know, the one who gets the expensive boots, who keep him, safe from rain and all that stuff. He can buy the one pair; they last him this long.
Mhm.
But the other poorer soldier has to buy the cheaper pair, and he cannot afford to buy the expensive pair. But he ends up paying more long over the long term with the cheaper pair of boots because he
Mhm.
can't spend the amount for the more expensive ones at one time. So I think that kind of solidified it. But honestly, that lesson only clicked with the jeans like the last, I say that's like last 5, 6 years.